it's not just rah, rah. He's really taking in the moments. And I think it goes back, to even things that he said, how I shouldn't even be here. I should be dead.
New York Times Siena poll has Donald Trump within single digits. In New York State, where Joe Biden won last time by 23 points. And those events that Donald Trump had, forget the polls, he had over 100,000 people show up to his event in Wildwood, New Jersey. That's the kind of energy, that's the kind of enthusiasm you're seeing right now for Donald Trump's campaign.
All right, guys, good Wednesday to you. Big night at the RNC last night. I want to break that all down, plus talk about and preview J.D. Vance's speech tonight. This is going to be big for him, because this is going to be an opportunity for the world to get to know the guy that I've gotten to know the last few years, who has a great American story, rags to riches, literally, joined the Marine Corps, fought for this country, got elected to the Senate, has been fighting for the American worker and the American people, and is truly a visionary when it comes to the MAGA agenda. We're going to talk about that tonight. Lyndsay Keith, my former co-host at Newsmax, she's on the ground. She's reporting there. We're going to get the inside scoop, what it was like in the hall last night with all those speakers, plus ask her what's different from now till the last time we had a real convention in 2016. Plus the president's pollster, Jim McLaughlin. He's literally feet from the Fiserv. He's been there the whole week. He's giving us the inside scoop on the latest polling, because guess what? The media now is trying to make this seem like it's a lot closer than it is. Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster, gives us the inside scoop. Plus, President Biden's team, their revolt is kind of back on, and he told a bunch of random things last night as he tries to tack left. We are going to go through it all. Before I do that, a couple things to get to. First, I want to tell you about the great folks at Gravity Defier. I have the walking shoes. This is the walking one that I use. And I also have the running one. I'll show you that at some point later. I'm telling you, folks, if you have hip, knee issues, I have both, unfortunately. This is a life changer. The comfort in Gravity Defier shoes is unreal. Unreal. You feel like you're bouncing. The support is also crazy. I have ankle issues. I'm sorry. I feel like a medical disaster here. But the bottom line is I've never worn anything like these in my life. It is a total game changer when you're walking and you're running. They have this technology called Verso, which is like the stuff they make trampolines, and you feel like you're walking on a trampoline. Plus, they've got these custom orthotics that come with every pair. It's unbelievable. I'm telling you, you will not regret this purchase. And if you go to GDEFY, and use code Spicer30, you get $30 off your order of $150 or more. Trust me, you will thank me for this. If you are a walker or a runner, or you just go to the gym a lot and do a lot of training, it is a game changer in how you work out or run or even walk. GDEFY.com, and then use code Spicer30. All right. I want to play you guys something real quick that is mind-blowing. I want to watch you this video that was posted about the bullets, plural, that went after Trump. Take a look.
Take a look what happened.
This is obviously slowed down, AI on the right, showing where these bullets went. Look at how close that is. One bob, one weave of the head. We are in a different world. I mean, guys, that's just crazy to look at. Also, I want to show you a quick clip from my former colleague, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Great lineup last night. Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Laura Trump, some everyday compelling Americans. But I defer to Sarah to sum up the night.
I got the chance to take my 4-year-old son, Huck, to bring your kid to work day. Much like Jill now drags Joe to bring your husband to work day.
Oh, there were a lot of great clips. Sarah and Laura Trump gave some very personal stories about their relationship with Donald Trump. I know the media likes to use the word humanize. I hate that word. I hate it. It's like he was unhuman to begin with, but it was a very personal look at Donald Trump, something that we don't hear as much. We hear about the policies a lot. And frankly, we hear a lot of negative attacks about him personally. And so I loved how they looked at that. But last night was boom, 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 winner, winner, winner. I mean, the everyday American stories, the woman who talked about her son, Weston, was a tearjerker. The individual, the family that got up there, the brother that talked about his sister getting killed by an illegal, unbelievably moving as well. And I think they did a great job mixing in speakers like that. Nikki Haley, love her or hate her, man, she opened up with a gangbuster. Boom. I full-throated endorsement of Donald Trump. And I think made the case, frankly, to a lot of the media. I mean, that's what this was. Trying to make sure the media knew it was okay that Nikki Haley had endorsed. Ron DeSantis gave a really good speech. And tonight is J.D. Vance. And I'm going to talk to Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster, a little bit. He apparently has some insight into this speech. So if you want to know where the polls are or what the speech is going to be like tonight, Jim McLaughlin coming up. I'm going to talk to Lyndsay Keith first, though. She is my former colleague at Newsmax. She worked the 2016 campaign. And she's on the ground in Milwaukee. He's in the hall. I want to get her take on everything like this. Plus, Biden, man, he introduced a bunch of crazy stuff yesterday, talking about changes to the Supreme Court. He wants to tax landlords for raising rent, starting at $55 if you increase your rent on the tenant. I mean, they are attacking far to the left, and the calls for him to step down have not stopped, folks. So before I bring in Lyndsay, I want to tell you about another great spot. I made a mistake last night. I got to tell you this. I have my Beam. And this is the one that I use. This is the cinnamon cocoa flavored. Oh my gosh, it is amazing. I had it at about 9:30 last night. Now the convention goes till 11 o'clock, as you know. And I'm telling you folks, when you take Beam, now I like the cinnamon one. They do have the brownie battered flavor that's really good too. It's sort of like, which kid do you like better if you have children? I do like the cocoa a little better, but the brownie is fantastic as well. And I'm telling you, by the time Laura Trump was speaking, I was having a hard time keeping my eyes open. It wasn't because I heard a speech. It's because Beam crushes it. It will put you in an amazing sleep. I wake up feeling refreshed because it's got everything in it that you have tried in the past. Melatonin, right? Magnesium. It's got L-theanine. It's got reishi. It's got apigenin. All the stuff, but in one amazing to-drink formula. I'm telling you, you will never be disappointed with the Dream Powder. It is awesome. Tastes amazing. I drink it all day if it did put me to sleep. You can get 40% off for a limited time if you go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Shopbeam.com/Spicer, up to 40% off. If you need a good night's sleep, you are going to love the Dream Powder from Beam. It's amazing. All right, I want to bring in Lyndsay Keith, who's live in Milwaukee. When Lindsay's done, I'm going to bring in Jim McLaughlin, the president's pollster. We got a big show ahead. All right, Lyndsay. Lyndsay, thanks for joining us. I mean, I think we're going to name you now chief correspondent to the convention.
That's great. I accept. I gladly accept, Sean.
That's awesome. All right, so tell me, let's go over last night. What was the bring us inside the hall. What was the reaction of the delegates to the various speeches last night?
You know, it was interesting. One of the ones I was anticipating the most was obviously Nikki Haley's speech. She wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. This was supposed to be a message of unity. And there was mixed response. Some people were cheering loudly and other people were booing. Actually, something not that you've been hearing that much here is booing. When Chuck Schumer came out, or rather Mitch McConnell, oh, that'd be something, Chuck Schumer. When Mitch McConnell came out just yesterday, or Monday rather, there was a ton of booing, the whole floor booing. But we haven't heard it since then until Nikki Haley's speech. And so I thought that was something that was really interesting, mixed messaging on her. And then obviously, so Donald Trump and J.D. Vance were not supposed to come out until after her speech, but they essentially changed the schedule. I don't know if it was specifically to hear her and Ron DeSantis, but I love that because we were able to see what his response was, something that people were eager to see. And it was interesting. He didn't show much emotion, just a little bit of smirk when she gave that full-throated support to him. But the mixed messaging on the floor, I think, told me a lot about how the delegates are still feeling about Nikki Haley.
But did it change? I mean, I thought, look, after Ted Cruz in 2016, where at the end he said, vote your conscience, and people went nuts, and Trump had come into the room. I felt like, to your point, he knew they must have had the speech, because once she came out and gave that full throttle endorsement right out of the gate, did that change the tone, or was there still some skepticism? Because I know she went on saying, we don't always agree. Was there still moaning after that, or was it just initially?
I think it was initially. It wasn't after that. After she came out, and I think she knew she needed to do it for just that reason, because there was concern about her being here. After that, it toned down, and people were rah. But it was interesting to see that. I feel like Donald Trump, and you tell me what you're seeing on the other side of the screen from him in person. He is much more somber, I think, than we normally see him. And we even saw him last night sitting when some of his family was standing around him at different times. And so that's been interesting. And also, as you know, but some viewers may know, it's really unprecedented to see the candidate until Thursday night. And so the fact that these delegates, that the country and the world are getting to see his reaction to some of these surrogates is fascinating to watch his response to them. And I don't know if that's for good or bad, because people really are just honing in on what does he think about what they're saying about him. And that one part where she said, you don't have to agree 100%, you could kind of look at his face and he was like, what?
But she followed that up, right? She followed that up by saying, and still vote for him. And I think that's what we need, is people to say, hey, I'm with you 70, 80%. And I'm still with you. I actually thought that message, I get it. If you're a delegate, you're probably 100%. But what she was saying to the rest of America is, if you still have some reservations, if you're a double hater, it's okay. You can vote for Donald Trump, because 70% of the policies, 80% of the policies, you probably agree with.
Well, that's a good point, Sean. And I do think it's something else, as you see the campaign really trying to make that narrative for JD Vance, because obviously he was not a huge Trump supporter in 2016, and some of the things have come out again, resurfacing about what he said against the former president, and they're using that same message that you just said. Ultimately, lean in. You don't have to be 100% for him, but understand that his policies work, and that at the end of the day, I think what Laura Trump said last night, that people saw a different side of Donald Trump on Saturday night. And it's also something, obviously, the former president very well, Sean, but you and I have spent time with him as well. And it's something that I've always wondered why he didn't show that kinder side to himself more often to the public, something that people get to experience behind closed doors, but that the world doesn't always get to see. And I think in light of Saturday's events, you're starting to see that side of him a little bit more, which is interesting for the world to see. And I do think, as we know that he's had issues with suburban women, that could be the deciding factor for them, ultimately, that they see now a different side that many people have never seen before.
So after Nikki Haley, I mean, look, I think last night, I was talking about this with Mark Halperin this morning. We have this morning meeting that we're doing at 8:30 in the morning. And I said, what I thought was fascinating was the mix. You had everyday Americans telling their story, someone about the personal repercussions of an open border, the repercussions of fentanyl in our country. Then you had Nikki Haley, as you've discussed. You had Vivek Ramaswamy. You had Ron DeSantis, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Laura Trump. Walk me through kind of the different reactions that people had. Are the everyday American stories penetrating? Is the hall full? I saw some chatter among the media that there wasn't that many delegates. And at the end of the day, I don't really care. I mean, this is being broadcast to millions. How are the various different speakers going over?
It's been interesting to see how the campaign has tried to kind of weave them in and out, to your point, that they don't want people only showing up for the big name speakers and delegates only arriving for those big key moments. And so you see, some of these everyday Americans speaking after a Nikki Haley or after a Ron DeSantis to try to weave them in, because I think that something that they've done really well is get these people that have really powerful stories to share with American people. And that is one of the things I think that JD Vance brings to the table as well. That I
want to talk about him in a second, but
okay. That he's walked in the footsteps of many everyday Americans, and that's the stories that you're hearing shared. So I would say the people that are in the room, those stories are landing very well because those people are so eloquent in sharing their stories with passion. But to your point, those ones that are earlier in the night, the hall isn't as full as it should be. And that's why I think it's important that they continue to intersperse them out throughout the night and not just pack the last half of the evening with some of those huge name speakers.
Yeah, I saw that one woman who lost her son to fentanyl, not because I mean, because literally he didn't overdose. He literally took the wrong pill. And the crowd started chanting Weston, Weston, Weston. It was very powerful. I can't imagine what it was like in the hall. But let me ask you this. Logistically, you're mentioning the schedule, right? And how it's being kind of laid out maybe to get more people engaged or whatever. When is it that like someone like you who's covering it, who's there, is given the schedule? Are you getting it hours in advance? Because I know even tonight we know the theme, but we don't know the speakers.
Yeah, this is fascinating. We're getting it at 10 a.m. So the RNC is doing a press conference every morning at 10 a.m. and that is when they let you essentially know what the rundown is going to be for that evening. And it's all for planning purposes only. So they don't even want
Meaning what? Meaning
on the record.
What is for? So for
you're not allowed to say on the record exactly what's happening that night. So I think, I mean, obviously as someone that's in communications, as you've been for a long time, I think that's a really interesting play. I don't quite understand why the campaign is doing it. The campaign is the one who is up there. Yesterday it was Jason Miller who was at the podium, literally going line by line down what the schedule is going to be for that evening. But I will say they told us that Donald Trump was going to come out at 9:02 and he ended up coming out around 8 o'clock. And I think that was to hear Nikki Haley's speech. And so they're kind of adjusting things a little bit differently than they've said. I don't know if that's because they're changing things on the fly and they don't have it buttoned up yet and they're kind of adjusting as needed, or if they're just trying to have moments of anticipation. And I'll also say something that's interesting, Sean. On Monday night, they went through the entire rundown. Danielle Alvarez went through it from the campaign, but she didn't talk that Glenn Youngkin was going to be speaking. And there were a few other people that she didn't mention as well. Ted Cruz didn't mention that he was going to be on the lineup. And so I don't know if they're trying to have these elements of surprise to keep people on their toes, or if it's because they're changing things so much. It's unclear.
Yeah, I think the third bucket is because Trump's got his hand in there and he's saying, I want to add this person. I want to change this up. I actually think that's a very strong possibility based on my history with him, that they don't want to get out in front of him because they know that he might say, I want to add Ted Cruz, or I want to move Ted Cruz, or I want to move up Nikki Haley, or I want to show up in the hall early.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, I think we both saw this. We work convention 2016, you're at the RNC. I was at the Committee on Arrangements. And when the Trump campaign kind of got embedded with the convention, he changed everything. I mean, he was so involved in everything. We were adjusting plans so much. And to your point, it was down to the last minute. And we put out stuff, forecasted it more in advance than they're doing right now. And that's my point, too, about some of these everyday American speakers. Are they going to pack the evening right before JD Vance? Who comes out? One of the big questions is, when is Melania going to come? Is she going to come? It was asked yesterday in that press conference if more family was arriving, and they said maybe. Obviously,
she's going to look. Okay, you tell me,
you think
Lindsay.
She's going to come?
She will, when he gets on stage, when Trump gets on stage and delivers his acceptance, she is going to walk out from backstage and join him on stage. She may not speak. She will be there and she will come out with him. I wouldn't be surprised if Ivanka does as well. I think you're going to see the whole family that night. That's my guess.
I think you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they're such a close-knit family, and I know that Ivanka and Jared have been trying to stay out of the political realm a little bit more of recent days, and Melania has not been as outspoken. But I think in light of Saturday's events, how do you not show up as a family?
Right.
How do you not support your dad? I just think that would be odd for this family. You know them even better than I do. But for a big moment like this for their dad and her husband, I think you have to show a unified front.
Oh, not only that, but I mean, Trump gets the showmanship, the idea of bringing Melania out from behind and Ivanka. I mean, look, I think people tune in to your point about Trump showing up last night. He brings people in terms of interest and excitement. Yeah. What's his reaction? How's he going over? I was glued to the split screen last night watching how he reacted to Nikki Haley and DeSantis. Even Sarah and Laura, it was like you could tell it was touching him. The stories that Sarah and Laura in particular, because they were personal, they touched him. And I mean, I don't mean to sound like a psychologist.
But it's so interesting because I was about 25, 30 feet from him when he walked out on Monday night. And I thought he was about to cry. And I've never seen the former president cry in my life. And I was like, that would be a moment. But to your point, even last night, he seemed very moved by what people were saying. And that's what I mean by seeing a more somber president. It's not just rah. He's really taking in the moments. And I think it goes back, to even things that he said, how I shouldn't even be here. I should be dead. And so I think the fact that he's able to take all this in, and then to your point, he is the ultimate showman, right? He understands media. He understands like what makes a great moment. And I think that's why, on top of other reasons, that he's here every night, because it's drawing attention. People want to see him. They want to see his reaction. And so the fact that he's giving that to the convention, in some way, it's a gift to the delegates, but it's also interesting for the viewer as well.
Yeah. You brought up JD Vance. There was a question, and I among some in the media in particular, how JD Vance would go over with the MAGA base and the delegates. What was the reaction to JD Vance, and how has it evolved since the announcement?
It's been interesting, to be honest. When it was announced on the floor on Monday, I was there. And it was not as raucous as I thought it would be. People were there was cheering and chanting. I don't want to get you wrong, but not as much as I would have expected. And then I actually went and talked to delegates from swing states, from Ohio. The Ohio delegates, of course, were pumped. They were excited. But when I spoke to other swing states, they were supporting the president. And they said, you know what? I would support whoever he put on his ticket. But many people didn't say, this was exactly who I wanted. This was the exact person who I wanted. I had a handful. But I would say the vast majority, their response more so was, I would have supported whoever Donald Trump wanted. My support is behind him. I trust him. I believe in him. I don't know if that's because he really is the ticket or because they did want somebody else. I will say yesterday I spoke to some individuals who were in the running off the record. They told me that they were disappointed and that they thought that it should have been a more diverse ticket. And they thought this wasn't the best choice for the campaign. And, a couple people have told me that now. So what I'll be interested to see is really how he is received tonight when he's on stage as he tells his story to the world. Obviously, he's very eloquent. He's very well spoken. I think it was one of the reasons many people thought maybe he wouldn't be selected because he might take attention away from Donald Trump and his ability to command a crowd. But when you see the two together, and I don't know if you feel this way, Sean, but when you see the two men together, it's pretty clear, that he is the young rising star and he's more in the shadows, in my opinion, and Donald Trump is ultimately the face. It's not somebody like maybe a Mike Pompeo, who you would think, oh, you're getting advice from Mike Pompeo on foreign policy and foreign politics, or maybe even, a Nikki Haley, how to bring the women vote. It's really, this is somebody who's going to champion the MAGA movement forward. I don't really see it as a situation, and this is my perspective, and also from seeing the two men together, of somebody that I'm leaning into to get advice about how to do things, as much as it's someone who can carry the movement forward.
I think that's right. I mean, I've thought that from the jump. He doesn't think he needs anybody. He wanted somebody who he thought would be a partner. Let me just ask you one last question. You mentioned this early on. You and I both worked the 2016 convention when Trump was the nominee, ultimately became president. From a convention standpoint, we went from that to COVID in 2020, now back to these in-person things. What has changed or not since that 2016 convention logistically?
Logistically.
I mean, is it more secure? Is it more hectic? Is it more exciting? Is it, hey, it's pretty much the same thing. You get what you get last time. Is it the showmanship bigger? I mean, when you walked in now, is it like, oh, this feels familiar. This is like it was in 2016. Or is it like, wow, they've really upped their game. Things have changed. It's much more harder security wise. I mean, is it the same feeling as 2016 or is it, wow, things have changed?
I would say some of both. I mean, the security presence, as you know, at any convention is very high. I mean, this is a national security event. I would say it feels like there are more police officers on the secondary perimeter when you're walking out. I mean, once you're outside of the hard perimeter, you have to go quite a few blocks before you are not seeing any police officers. I mean, and they're in droves. It's not just little smatterings. I mean, you're talking 20 to 30 group of police officers in like every section. So I'd say it does feel like a little more on the security front. But I would say the biggest difference to me here from 2016 is the energy. And in 2016, it was unclear who was going to be the nominee till not too much before the convention. And then people were kind of wondered if Trump could beat Hillary Clinton. It was unclear at that point. And I don't think the party was really unified around him. That is completely different here. I've never seen such a unified Republican Party in my lifetime, I don't think. And there's so much energy. I think that they feel like the momentum is in their favor, especially in light of what's happening to Joe Biden right now, that they really feel like this is theirs in November. And they have, I feel like it feels like more of a family. In the past, there's been more booing on the floor than there was. Obviously, I mentioned those 2 times, but I would say that's the difference. People are happy. Even the media is happy here, and you don't hear as much criticism as you normally do. That's so odd to me. It's so odd to me that it almost feels like everyone is just happy here, and there's not the criticism that you had in 2016. So I say that's the difference, the unity and the lack of criticism in many ways. And I think that a lot of that's in light of Saturday's events.
That's excellent to hear. And I think I'm so glad you said that. And that's a huge noticeable shift from that 2016 convention. Lyndsay Keith, newly minted chief correspondent, Sean Spicer show in Milwaukee, also happens to be on Merritt Street. But, I'm going to talk to Dr. Phil. We'll figure out how we do this revenue sharing issue.
Yeah,
I would just call him.
Yeah.
Lyndsay, thanks for keeping us up to date. I'll see you soon.
So good to see you. All right.
Amazing conversation with Lyndsay Keith. Before I bring in Jim McLaughlin, I want to tell you about your retirement money. If you've got a 401k or an IRA or similar retirement plan, the government controls it, right? They tell you how much you can borrow and everything you can do. Well, Bank on Yourself is a different and proven alternative retirement plan system that lets you bypass Wall Street and beat the banks at their own game. With Bank on Yourself, you get guaranteed predictable growth and retirement income. You get tax-free retirement income. You get to be in control. You access your money for any purpose. No questions asked. No government penalties or restrictions on how much. You can't do that, as you know, with a 401k or an IRA. This is a totally separate alternative to retirement planning that is an unbelievable way to get around all the government restrictions, and you get to be in control. It gives you peace of mind, too, with a minimum guaranteed value of retirement savings on the day that you want to tap into. So you can get a free report with all the details that I'm talking about. If you go to Bank on Yourself, the strategy guarantees predictable control and a real financial plan. Bankonyourself.com/Spicer. Bankonyourself.com/Spicer. Okay, let's bring in the President's Pollster, Jim McLaughlin. All right, we're going to stay in Milwaukee. We're going to bring in the President's Pollster, Jim McLaughlin. Jim, let me tell you the interesting thing here. I woke up this morning and I saw 2 kind of, I don't even call them polls, right? It's forecasting models. You have the 538 model that says Biden wins 54 out of 100 times of their various analyses. That's polling, that's economic data, whatever. Okay. But then you got CNN reporting on Trump having a path to 330 electoral votes. Obviously, 270 needed to win. He got 306 in 2016. Those are 2 very, very different analyses of the race. Where do you see this?
Yeah. And look, Sean, you and I don't usually agree with CNN, but I think here there's no question the CNN model is much more accurate with the way the race stands right now. And think about it. A poll just came out yesterday. Donald Trump is ahead in Virginia. Donald Trump doesn't have to win Virginia.
Yeah.
And you look at it, too, there's a lot of these battleground states, especially the Sunbelt battleground states. I haven't seen a legitimate published poll that in a place like Arizona, in a place like Nevada, or a place like Georgia, where Joe Biden is ahead. He's just not ahead. And we've basically been seeing this pretty steadily since the fall. And I tell people where you really saw the change was a few weeks after October 7th, because that is one of the key issues where Donald Trump has a significant advantage over Joe Biden, is keeping America safe. And people saw that with October 7th. They saw it with Afghanistan. And now we're also seeing Donald Trump has a significant advantage over Joe Biden when it comes to economic issues. That's why he's got the lead in the polls. And I tell people, look, if you don't believe Donald Trump's on offense, look where the Democrats are campaigning. You're seeing Jill Biden. You're seeing Joe Biden. They're going to places like Minnesota, where a Republican hasn't won since Richard Nixon in 1972. So they're being forced to defend Democratic-leaning states.
And how much do you think from an advisory standpoint, to your point, he doesn't need to win Virginia. He doesn't need to win Minnesota, right? What, from a campaign tactical standpoint, you and I have talked about this before, where you put your money and your time says a lot about your campaign. Where are we going to see Donald Trump and JD Vance in the next 3.5 months?
Oh, I think, again, you're going to see them on offense. You're going to see them, of course, in the all-important battleground states. And I think one of the places where JD Vance is going to be a huge help to the campaign is in flyover country. The battleground states, the all-important, remember they used to call it the blue wall of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? JD Vance is going to be able to connect with those voters in the same way Donald Trump has been able to connect with those voters. I think that's where you're going to see them spending a lot of time. But you're also, poll just came out a few weeks ago. Donald Trump was up by a point in New Jersey, in blue New Jersey. New York Times Siena poll has Donald Trump within single digits in New York State, where Joe Biden won last time by 23 points. And those events that Donald Trump had, forget the polls, he had over 100,000 people show up to his event in Wildwood, New Jersey, for a Republican candidate for president. Then he had enough tens of thousands of people show up in the South Bronx, a Democratic stronghold. That's the kind of energy, that's the kind of enthusiasm you're seeing right now for Donald Trump's campaign.
You know, you brought up JD Vance, and a lot of the media has been blowing their minds about, well, what did JD Vance add to the campaign, and what was this and what was that? I've made it very clear my case on JD Vance and why I thought he was a good pick. Walk us through, from your standpoint, what does JD Vance add or not, and why was he a good pick?
Oh, I think he was a great pick. And the reason why I think he's a great pick, you know, he's everything the Democratic Party used to be. He came up, literally, he's everything the Democrats used to be. They would go nuts over a candidate like J.D. Vance years ago. He came up from nothing, a broken family. His family is on welfare. He works his way through college. Then he goes to Yale Law School. And, oh, by the way, in the meantime, he goes into the Marines after September 11th to defend his country. Then he's a successful businessman. And then he goes and starts a not-for-profit. It's amazing what he's done in his short lifespan, not to mention he's a U.S. Senator now. I think he's the perfect candidate because he's going to be able to echo the America First agenda, and he's a living embodiment of the American dream. I think it's a home run choice. And you know what? After tonight, when he delivers, I'm really, really excited about his speech tonight. I've seen some parts of it. I think he's going to be terrific.
Okay, you've seen the parts. What does he focus on?
I think he's going to focus on restoring the American dream. He's going to talk about his personal story. And that's why I think J.D. Vance, I don't think there's any question, that's why he decided to run for U.S. Senate, was because he saw the American dream is becoming almost unattainable under the failures of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats. Between their crazy Green New Deal energy policies that, by the way, they hurt working class Americans. They hate workers. Right. That's who they hurt the most. And you know who they helped the most? They helped Vladimir Putin in Russia, and they helped Xi Jinping in China. I mean, that stuff is just madness. Not to mention, J.D. Vance believes in lower taxes. He believes in fair trade. He believes in trade. There's all this talk about him being an isolationist and all this other kind of nonsense. That's not true. He believes in exactly what Donald Trump believes in. He believes in fair trade that helps America.
I'm glad you said that because I saw an NBC News report today. They're like, he's anti-Ukraine, he's anti-this. And I don't buy that. It's not that he's against it. He just doesn't want to be suckered, spewing away U.S. tax dollars with no mission that's in sight, that no plan for success. That's called common sense. And saying I don't want trade deals that screw American workers is not anti-trade. The media is trying to demonize him, shocker, But I think that we need to make sure that people understand that JD Vance is for common sense solutions and outcomes, not for just giving the house away. But I want to ask you about a message that I thought was interesting. The president had, and by all accounts, it was Donald Trump himself that invited Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters president, to speak. I get the imagery of this, okay? It's the first time a Teamsters president addresses the Republican convention. It shows Trump's bringing in new voices and new people. But a lot of conservatives were not happy with a guy who stands on stage at the Republican National Convention and goes after tax cuts, corporations, and so where's that balance between wanting to appeal to new peoples and inviting the heads of unions that are anathema to what our party should, and our movement, frankly, stands for?
You know why Sean O'Brien came? And you know why Donald Trump invited him? Because in spite of the democratic nature of these unions, folks like Sean O'Brien, they get it. More than half their union membership, especially in these private sector unions, they're voting for Donald Trump.
I know. No.
And
I get that. But they could have had they could have had a Teamster. They've done a great job with everyday Americans. I get having a Teamster that says, hey, I'm a member of the Teamsters. Having the president of the Teamsters get up there and bash conservative principles, I think turned off some folks.
You know what? I always tell everybody, you know what Donald Trump, and you know this, Sean, because you know him really well. Donald Trump is a great listener. He's a great listener. He talks to people all day. He wants to have different perspectives on people's lives. You know, the whole idea of no taxes on tips, that came up from Donald Trump talking to the workers at his hotel properties. He knew
I know.
He knew it was a good idea. He was talking to them and they're saying it's ridiculous how this IRS is going after these poor waiters and waitresses on their tips. So that's why he brings in a Sean O'Brien. And look, obviously the president doesn't agree with everything that Sean O'Brien says. But you know what we're for on the Republican Party that the Democrats aren't for? We're for free speech. And we want to listen to these folks. We're not going to give them everything they want. It's like I always say with Donald Trump, you know what? He's a great listener, but he's never stage managed. Because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to do what he believes is best for the country. And both him and J.D. Vance, you've seen them change on issues over the years. Because Donald Trump, he does what he thinks is going to work. Remember, they told us his tax cuts weren't going to work. They were going to bankrupt the country. Those tax cuts, could you imagine what would have happened when COVID hit? If we didn't have his tax cuts and our economy was roaring along, the only reason we were able to recover was because of Donald Trump's strong economy that he gave us with the taxes, the deregulation, and the energy independence. And that's what him and J.D. Vance are going to restore to the country.
Yeah, I get it. And I listen, at the end of the day, he's got a strong record, Donald Trump does, of doing the right thing policy-wise, standing up for conservative principles. In fact, I would argue the most conservative president in my lifetime, and I would probably put that up against any. What has changed first since the debate in terms of the mood of the country? There were all these people that thought because Biden basically had a horrible debate that the race would shift and the polling would freak out. I've always believed that it's pretty cemented. If you like Joe Biden, you're not just going to abandon him. I mean, you might abandon him, but you're not voting for Trump. The base. I'm talking the base here. Yeah. Same thing with Trump. And so were you shocked about what movement occurred post debate, and what do you think has changed since then?
I wasn't shocked, and I told a lot of people, look, you're not going to see it right away, because I think half of America was in shock when they saw that debate. They knew that, people are saying, you have John Kareem Pierre is telling us that she can't keep up with Joe Biden. They were telling us how energetic he is and all that other kind of stuff. And you saw it firsthand. I think a lot of Democrats didn't realize how bad off he was. But because of the time when the debate fell, I told people you wouldn't really see public opinion until after July 4th. And that's when you really started to see it. And again, there hasn't been a credible national poll where Donald Trump has not been ahead in any of those polls. I mean, even in those all-important blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, he's ahead in every single one of those states. And you've seen several polls that have come out over the last couple of days where he's actually up in Pennsylvania by anywhere from 3 to 5 points. And look, again, because what I thought was most interesting was when you asked questions like who they thought was most presidential, who they thought was most fit to be president, not my polls, CBS, YouGov, CNN, et cetera, said it was overwhelmingly Donald Trump. But where he had the biggest advantage in those polls is when they were asking about the issues that people care about most. Things like the economy, things like national security, things like border and immigration. He's got double-digit leads in the battleground states over Joe Biden on those issues. And even an issue like democracy, Washington Post poll showed Donald Trump had a double-digit lead on the issue of democracy. That's why the left and the Democrats are wigging out right now.
Has anything changed, or do you expect it to change post-assassination attempt?
Look, that's going to be interesting. And we haven't done a lot of polling. We really don't do a lot of polling, believe it or not, this week during the during the convention week, because you have trouble getting some voters to the poll. So I think we'll really see that movement next week. But I think up to this point, I've never seen it like this. Usually,
I think this is 9.5, 9.5. I mean,
no, look, people ask me all the time, what's more important, the base or the swing? And I say they're both important. You can't win without the other. But the base, I can tell you right now, I've never seen them this united. And I've been going to conventions since going back to 1992. Yeah. And it's all Republicans, even folks that were voting for supporting Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. They're overwhelmingly behind Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, Lyndsay Keith was on just before you. And she said the same thing. That one of the things that she really saw the change from 2016 to now was the degree of unity that is behind Donald Trump. I want to ask you one more question about the Biden ticket. I believe, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole here, but I do believe that Joe Biden will be the nominee of the Democratic Party, barring some medical kind of issue. Okay. I've seen that, they're out there testing the other people. I know a lot of folks on our side, and this is where I want you to confirm my suspicions. People say we know Kamala Harris, and I think for the most part we do. Me, you, the viewers of this show, people who are in touch with politics. But you walk down the street of New Jersey or Rhode Island or Montana, and I think there's a difference between being an unknown kind of gaffe-prone vice president and the top of the ticket. I don't like our side, I guess what I'm getting at is this. I think people on our side better be careful what we wish for. $100 million of Hollywood money to recast her in a very different light is not the Kamala Harris that we would be facing. And so do you agree that we should hope that Joe Biden stays the nominee and that we don't end up with a Kamala Harris or anybody else? Not that we can't beat them.
Yeah.
But it's a very different race.
Oh, I think, look, I just think the country needs a free and fair election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I really believe that. I mean, for the sake of the country, because, to pull out Joe Biden or whatever at this point in time, and who knows, it may happen, I think would not be good for the country, because it wouldn't be the voters deciding. It would be the elites, and that's the last thing the voters want. But look, we're preparing for every scenario. But you see in these polls right now, she runs worse than Joe Biden. I know there was a couple outliers that said, she was running slightly better than Joe Biden. But look, I just saw one of the national polls this morning. She's down by 10 points nationally to Donald Trump. But to your point, you are 100% correct. If she would somehow become the nominee, the press would try to elevate her in a way that we've never seen before. They'd make her out a cross between Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, and Mother Teresa. But the problem she is saddled with Joe Biden's failed record. And It is a failed record. His disapproval rating among all voters is approaching 60%. And remember, his biggest failure has been on the border, and he put Kamala Harris in charge of that border.
Yeah. All right, Jim, always appreciate you being with us, guys. Remember, tonight, J.D. Vance is speaking. I think Jim's right. This is going to be I am so excited to hear this J.D. Vance speech. I've known him for a while, but I think that the rest of America is going to get to know the J.D. Vance that I've gotten to know tonight. He's going to do a phenomenal job telling his story, as Jim said, really touching on that base that he needs to. We'll break it all down tomorrow, plus preview President Trump's speech from Milwaukee tomorrow. This is going to be an exciting 2 days of shows. You might as well make sure that you hit that notification button right now, because as you remember, we're doing that morning meeting every morning at 8:30 right here on YouTube Live. The other channels, you need to come over to YouTube. We'll read your comments, tell you what's going to happen that day, and then by here every night we stream the premiere at 6 o'clock. Hit those buttons, subscribe to YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Always hit the notification button, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.